Janovic.
Here we are well into the month of September, and it is National Recovery Month. National Recovery Month celebrates the gains, the wins made by those who are in recovery from substance abuse.
7 in 10 adults who have had substance abuse issues consider themselves to be either recovering or in recovery, according to Health and Human Services. That number was so inspiring to me, Debbie. 21 million Americans. That was much higher than I thought it would be.
Let's bring Evan down. He's the Associate Director of the Utah Support Advocates for Recovery Awareness, and also Tiffany Nacarado. Did I say that? Nacarado?
Yes.
Okay, she's smiling at me. Nacarado, Program Manager, also the Community Empowerment Coordinator on the show with us. Welcome to the studio.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So Dave's inspired by this number, 7 and 10, and I'm right there with you, Dave.
Yeah, in part because, and our listeners may have heard me say this in the past, as my dad was a recreational therapist that primarily worked with youth, trying to teach them alternatives to getting high, have natural highs. So he'd take them skiing and whitewater rafting and survival hikes, stuff like that. So I grew up around it. I worked in it a little bit in my 20s, so I worked with some of these kids. And I tell you, there are a few things that are more exciting than to see somebody overcome some of these struggles. But it is a battle, and I've seen it firsthand. And it is a grind, and it is a slog. So, Evan, let me start off with you. For people that can feel overwhelmed, that can feel hopeless, what's your message?
Sure. So I just want to point out first that I'm myself a person in long-term recovery from a substance use disorder. So hope is out there. People can and do recover. I think, we hear a lot about the ravages of addiction, people dying from overdose in our communities, and we don't hear nearly as much about how many people get well, how many people get better. And that's happening all around us all the time. And support and resources are out there for people that need them.
Evan, walk us through the before.
Sure.
When you were working through your addiction and trying to crawl out of that cycle, and how you feel now.
Yeah. So, it was tough for me. I was a person that had alcohol use disorder, and so I was addicted to alcohol primarily, but drugs were also part of my story. And at the worst of it, I ended up homeless on the street, absolutely destitute, right? I had no resources, no support to get better. And it was really just through the kindness of some folks that I knew, some friends from high school that got me back into treatment so I could get help for my substance use disorder, that I was able to start to do better.
One of the things, Tiffany, that I guess maybe shouldn't surprise folks, but is how many people it affects. It doesn't matter your race, your income, whether you have a great family support or no family support.
Yeah.
It can hit anybody.
Yes, it definitely can. I'm also a person in long-term recovery, and I really enjoy speaking out about this topic to spread hope for those that might still be suffering. But I was a stay-at-home mom, had the white picket fence, had a lot of family support, had little ones running around the house. That was my dream. And I still fell into addiction. And so, it does not discriminate. It can be anyone and everyone.
Can we pry a little bit and ask you, what was your addiction journey like, in terms of what substances were you addicted to, and why do you think you fell into addiction?
I trace it back to not feeling like I belonged, and so I was constantly being a people pleaser my whole entire life, and up until adulthood, and just doing everything for everyone else, and lost myself in the journey of being that full-time mom and showing up for many people but myself. And when I've had many drug abuses, but the main ones, were opiates and methamphetamines. And it took me down to leaving my kids at the doorstep and being unsheltered on the streets of Salt Lake for 6+ years, and very scary. And what got me out of that is actually support and spiritual awakenings.
How long does it take? Because I think we all love the idea of waving a magic wand and it's just over. But is there something you should prepare yourself for if you're looking to get clean? How long does it take?
You know, I would say every journey is different, right? So addiction looks different for everybody, and so does recovery. And so for some people, it might take just one shot. They go to treatment and they get better right away. But for some other people, it might take many attempts to do better over the long term. We know that addiction is a chronic but manageable condition. It's a brain disorder that affects people throughout the course of their life. And so people need long-term support to get better from addiction.
So speaking to this point, if you are going through recovery, and it didn't take the first time or even the second time, what's your message to continue, keep moving forward? And then on the family side of things, how do you teach them to have the patience to let them keep battling for months, years, decades?
Right.
I would say that for the family support is that families recover together, so get whatever treatment or support that you need as a family member, because it is difficult to show up for your loved one that might be suffering with addiction. And for us, what was the question? Sorry.
No, it's how do you keep the family motivated to support folks that are maybe going through a second, third, or fourth round of treatment?
Yeah, don't give up on hope, because my family definitely were in a state of hopelessness on me, and really tried over and over again. And then when I was finally willing or ready, I should say, to get the help I needed, they automatically jumped in. And so, yeah, don't give up hope. We might seem that we're hopeless at times, but there's never zero hope.
September is National Recovery Month, which marks and celebrates the gains and the wins for those who have become addicted to drugs or alcohol and pulled themselves through it and are on the road constantly to recovery. We're joined right now by Evan Doan and also Tiffany Naccarato. Evan and Tiffany are with Utah Support Advocates for Recovery Awareness. We're going to step aside for just a few moments. Stick around. I do want to ask about, what was your when did your light bulb moment happen that it was like, it's either now or never? And if I don't start fixing the issues now, I may never recover. Let's talk about that next.
Dave and Dujanovic.
If you've ever dealt with substance abuse disorder yourself, you have a family member who's dealing with it, and you're feeling all kinds of frustration trying to help them, this is the conversation that you're going to want to listen to. And if you can't, you got to podcast it later. We're speaking live right now about the National Recovery Month, which celebrates the gains made by those who are recovering from substance abuse, and have been talking with Evan Doan, who's the Associate Director of the Utah Support Advocates for Recovery Awareness, and Tiffany Naccarato, who is a program manager for the organization, about recovery. Both of them have been right where so many people have been. You're both in recovery, long-term recovery. Thanks for sticking around to continue our conversation.
When we talk about substance use disorders, oftentimes there's a mental illness aspect to it as well. Can you speak to that?
Sure. There's a huge amount of what we call comorbidity between those two things, right? That people often have substance use disorders, but also have a mental health issue going on at the same time, and they contribute to one another. So what we know is that people need to seek support and treatment for both things. That you can't get better from one without getting better from both.
And a lot of times, in my experience, when someone is struggling with mental illness, they'll self-medicate with alcohol and drugs, and it just compounds when those two are coming together.
Absolutely. It can totally exacerbate the existing issues. So, yeah.
Tiffany, when we were last talking to you about your addiction and your journey to get out of it, you'd said that you were living on the streets for 6 years, that you had even left your children behind, that you had become a mom who was addicted to methamphetamine and opioids as well. That is just staggering to think that you were there for 6 years on the streets. What was the light bulb moment? What was that? What was that moment like when you decided I've got to pull myself out of this?
Yeah, well, each day that I spent out there on the streets, like my light kept getting dimmer and dimmer. I didn't have a lot to live for. At that 6 year mark, I was like really trying to end my life, and it just didn't happen. And for me, the grace of God, it didn't happen. But I was like, I have to do something else because what I'm doing is not getting me where I wanted to be, and that was death, sadly. And so I said, okay, what can I do? And that's where and at that moment too, like I just was running from the law. I just totaled another car. My boyfriend just went to prison. Like all these things, I was getting, violated on the streets as a woman, and it was just that gift like of desperation. Like, what can I do? And that's when I asked for help that last time. And I had asked for help numerous times before, but I wasn't at that space where I would receive the help that was given. And so at that moment, asking for help, and I'm so grateful that I had people that were willing to hand out, their hand and give me the love that I needed that I could not give myself at the time.
What was the difference between the time you finally decided I'm going to get help and I'm going to get through this, and the other times where you'd ask but nothing came of it?
Well, for me, it was that I didn't have, like I said, anything left, right? My partner on the streets was, gone, and I was very, very lonely. And even small things, like I couldn't pay my phone bill to call my kids anymore like I was daily, during that time. And so I just had nothing, even with hardly anything being on the streets. I had nothing left that was on there, a little small bag that I was sleeping on. And but most importantly, was it like the materialistic thing? It was within my soul. The light was very, very dim. I just didn't see anything else but to surrender.
When in recovery or when you're going through the journey, what about the slip-ups, the times where you reuse or you drink and then you try to reset? What is a message that you can send to folks that have tried this, maybe do have a slip-up? And again, having both been in recovery, I'm sure you've seen this, where there's the slip-up.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced that. I've had, incidents of use in my recovery, and something that I would encourage anyone to do is to be gentle with yourself, because we're our own worst critics, and we're always also harsh on ourselves whenever we have, make a mistake. And so just to give yourself some grace and to give yourself, permission to get better again, I think is a huge thing you can do for yourself.
Evan Doan and Tiffany Nacarado, both with Utah Support Advocates for Recovery Awareness, in studio with us today as we walk through the path to recovery. Both of them are in recovery from substance abuse disorder, and we're clearly working hard at it every day. And to get the message out, what are the options now? Inpatient, outpatient? I think it's so expensive for some families that they get fearful of the cost. Yep. Walk us through some of that, Evan.
Yep. There's tons of options available for folks these days. And what I would encourage anyone who's struggling or anyone who has a family member who's struggling to do is to reach out to us, USARA. We're just there to help. We don't charge anyone any money. We don't ask for insurance information of any kind. We're all just folks in recovery, here to help people find what's going to work for them. And so we have 5 recovery community centers across the state of Utah. So one in Salt Lake, St. George, Ogden, Price, and Moab. And so there's support all across the state for people who are looking for resources to help them recover from addiction.
Oh, please.
I was just going to say, and if you're not in one of those, but next to one of those offices, you can also call, and we have the virtual option too. So for more of the rural areas.
What role has fentanyl played in drug use and addiction?
Unfortunately, it's made the consequences of addiction much more dire, right? We're seeing more people die from overdose these days than we ever have. Over 100,000 Americans every year die as a result of drug overdose. And now the Kaiser Family Foundation this last week released a report that said 1 in 10 American adults has had a family member die from overdose. So we have seen a huge loss of life to fentanyl, but also to other substances. And it's impacting a generation of Americans. We're losing more people to addiction now than we ever lost at the height of the AIDS epidemic or at the height of the Vietnam War. It's really changing a generation.
Those are staggering numbers. 1 in 10?
Yep.
1 in 10 has had a family member lost.
That's right.
Through drug addiction. Oh, wow, that is.
Do you think it's getting worse in Utah?
I think that we're stemming the tide as best we can. I think that we're seeing the numbers get worse nationally, but Utah's kind of held steady because we've been doing a lot in this state to combat addiction, and luckily we've had a lot of great thinkers united on this issue, from the legislature to community groups like ours. There's been some really kind of sustained and united action around addiction.
How has recovery changed, or the treatment changed over the years, or is it largely the same as it was in past decades?
Well, today there's so many more options for people than there once was. I think that, decades ago, the only option that people knew of were 12-step groups. And those still exist, of course, and are very helpful for some people. But there's lots of other options available today, too. So there's groups like Recovery Dharma, which is more Buddhist-based, or Smart Recovery, which is like cognitive, or fitness recovery groups like Fit to Recover or Warrior Strength. There's lots of different options for people these days. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. People can really find what's going to support them in their recovery.
So Salt Lake City has a recovery day, and it's this Saturday, September 9th, from 2 until 8 o'clock tonight. Folks can head over where?
Jordan Park. So,
okay.
Yeah, 9th West and 1060 South. And so, and there's Recovery Day events all throughout September, all across the state of Utah. There's actually 13 events statewide this year. But our Salt Lake event is this Saturday, you're right, from 2 to 8 p.m.
And what when people get to Jordan Park, what will be there awaiting them?
We'll have entertainment. There'll be food trucks. There's over 70 different community organizations that will have resources that can help you find, different kinds of things that will support people in recovery. It's a huge event that really...
Kid Zone.
Yeah.
Kid Zone.
Kid Zone, thank you, yeah.
Rock climbing wall.
Yeah.
So people can learn more information about how to get on the path to recovery, or if they have a loved one who needs help. All of this at one-stop shopping on Saturday.
That's right. Yep.
That's awesome.
And
Yes.
Tiffany, as you said, the Kid Zone, that stood out to me as well, because recovery, these are not coming from childless families,
Right.
and this is
Exactly.
an important part of it. Is it important to you for your kids, or for kids to see that mom or dad are getting help?
Yes, it's very important because they'll see us in our, addiction. And so to see us recover just instills, that seed of hope, too, that can maybe trickle down into other areas of their life.
Tiffany Nacarado, Evan Doan, thank you for joining us, and best of luck. We'll look forward to your event on Saturday, Jordan Park, right, from 2 to 8? All
Yep.
right. We look forward to it.
Yeah, good luck with that. And thank you so much for spending 30 minutes with us. In fact, if our listeners are tuning in a little late and maybe you're teeing up for Maria's afternoon news and you missed the conversation, but you want to catch it, KSLNewsRadio.com. It will be loaded a little later. It's going to be your one-stop shopping for all the information regarding what we just talked about, and you can get access to the podcast as well and more information on Recovery Day in Salt Lake City on Saturday at Jordan Park.